Welcome back to another episode of the Startup Therapy Podcast. This is Ryan Rutan, joined as always by my friend, the founder and CEO of startups.com, Wil Schroter. Wil, we talk about the sacrifices, the costs, the benefits, all the complicated calculus of what it means to be a founder a lot. But how often does it come around where we're really like, it's thrown in our face, we're forced to examine this whole question of, okay, now, even if we're on the other side of it and we've achieved some success, was it worth it? How did it all net out?
Right. It's interesting because we all have like a reflection or like, moments where we're kind of just thinking about the past and kind of where we are right
Yeah.
now and things like that. But I think it's rare that you have like, call it a moment of gratitude
Yeah.
where something specifically like a very seminal moment makes you go, that was kind of worth it. Or the opposite, which was, damn, that was absolutely not worth it.
Yeah.
And that actually happened to me totally unexpectedly like a week ago. I'm doing this middle school class on entrepreneurship in my daughter's school. For their school, it's 5th through 8th grade. That comprises the middle school. And I teach this class on entrepreneurship. Well, at the beginning of the class, I do like a little like TED talk about my journey and things like that, and kind of how I became an entrepreneur and really all the crazy stuff that I had to go through. And it's rare, and I know we talked about this in a previous episode, that you get to do a TED talk about your life in front of your kid. It was cool though, because like she didn't have to respond to it. Right. My daughter's awesome, but like she was in a room full of kids. So it wasn't like I was sitting in the living room lecturing her.
You didn't corner her at dinner, right?
Like, yeah. And so she could just take it in.
We paid for this roast beef we're eating tonight.
That's usually where it comes from, right? So we do this whole thing, class over, and we get out and we hop in the car, and she's a little bit quiet initially. And we're driving home, and she's like, "Dad, what you said was amazing. Like, I had no idea what you went through to create the life that we have for us. And I just want to say, I'm really grateful." And I never expected that. And it was unprompted. And it just like, I was like beside myself. And it occurred to me like 40 years of grinding, 30 years of my career, 10 years of just trying to get out of the shit situation that I was in.
Yeah.
I finally got a thank you, so to speak, or more specifically, it wasn't about the thank you. I shouldn't say that. I finally got a, damn, dude, that was kind of worth it in 5 seconds. It was amazing. I never saw that coming, but it was one of the rare moments, and it just happened a week ago, where it all came full circle, and it felt like, yeah, that was 100% worth it. But I'm curious how, when we're making these decisions, like making the sacrifices, et cetera, when and if we get to a point where we get to have that assessment of, was it worth it? So I think it'd be kind of cool if you and I did it now, right? In real time, and look back what wasn't worth it and what was worth it.
What were the costs? And no, it's interesting. And I think, it's fortunate when we do get to have these moments where that reflection comes back and does sort of say like, taking on the whole, it was worth it, right?
Yeah.
Now, here's what's really interesting. If you had asked 22-year-old Wil, like, all right, you're going to spend the next 30 years of your life to achieve a moment. Here's the moment. Would you have gone, hell yeah, I'm signing up for that? So I think that's the other thing that's interesting, is that some of this, like some of the value in that moment that you had with Summer came from all of the sacrifices, came from the things that were and weren't worth it, right?
Yeah. It wasn't like I was going through hardship and working all those hours so that one day I could, have my 13-year-old daughter say thank you.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, there was a part of me when I was sacrificing all of this stuff that hoped like hell there would be a payout.
Yeah. No, I think, I think that's what's so interesting about it in some cases, is that the payout is amorphous, or it's not what we thought it was going to be, right? The payout is the house and the Lambo and the whatever, right?
Yeah,
and
right.
Like, those things happen and they go away, and you're like, well, okay, those did make me happy for a minute or two or 5 years or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But it wasn't the payoff that I needed. It wasn't the thing that made me feel like it was worth it. Those felt like transactionally worth it. Right? There was a bit of a give back, but it didn't feel like the full payback. I get these moments a couple times a year, it feels like at this point, where something happens in life, right? Often comes from my wife, or reflective moment where we're together, where it's coming out of one of these moments where like life either feels like really great and we're super happy for it. Like you're just sitting there and you're just looking around and you're like, you know what? Things are doing what they're supposed to be doing, or what we would hope that they would do. Like we're getting what we want right now out of life, and this feels good. And those moments of gratitude will come. Like some of them are internal for me and those feel great. Sometimes it's just her like turning to me and saying like, you know what, thank you for what you've built. This is amazing. Like we wouldn't be doing this without you, clearly. Other times it's actually in moments of hardship where this all also feels worth it, right?
Yep.
Because, and we've talked about this before too, which is like the ability to navigate and survive some of these disasters that life throws at us. Like one of the things that I learned by living a life of disaster for a long time building companies is that you can survive them. You can get through them. So when I think back and reflect on moments like when my father had his stroke, and that was an extremely difficult period in our life, but like I was really grateful that not only I had the resilience and the patience and the fortitude and the resources to do it, but patience from people like you, right? And all of this other stuff, like this support that I needed, that wasn't just taken for granted and wasn't just there by default. It was earned, right? It were the things that we did, other sacrifices we made that said, in this moment, now you can have some payback for this that made it worth it.
Let's break this in two. Let's start with the things that weren't worth it.
Yeah.
Right. Because I think that things either we couldn't get back or we wish we could go back in time and change, etc. I think a lot about it in terms of like missed experiences. And I think everybody has missed experiences by definition, but these were very intentionally missed experiences. Like the first thing that comes to mind is I didn't have a college experience. I went to a college, right? I took classes, but I had nothing. I don't have a single moment where I was walking across the quad and just got involved in a spontaneous volleyball game, right? Like that happened never for me.
Never. I didn't play beer pong until I was 36 years old. Like late in the career for that one. Yeah.
I talked to so many people that pine about how incredible college was. Here's what I remember of college. I remember not getting into college. I remember being forced to go to college, self-inflicted, on the weekends full-time while working 2 full-time jobs. And I remember like college was a thing that existed while I was working that was just getting in the way of working, right? I started my company, I was 19. So really throughout my entire college career, I had a very full-time job and then some. Like classes were just something that I had to go to because I was still paying for this thing called college. And I had no idea that I was going to build a company, in other words, that it was going to work. All of the fun parts that people talk about, like spring breaks, I've never went on a spring break. It didn't even occur to me. In fact, I spent my first spring break learning to code, right? Like holed up in the graduate dorms because I had nowhere else to live. Now, when you look back on, let's start with college, just because that's a seminal moment. What do you remember? Like what is it to you?
Oh, a lot of the same things. Like I remember like one of my happiest college moments actually was figuring out that I could cheat the system a little bit because the university we went to had a cap on credit hours. And kind of like you, at that point, I was in a position where like I felt like university was kind of getting in the way of this other thing that I was doing. Yeah. But I had committed to it. Everybody expected that I'd do it. Yeah. And all the advice I was getting from the people around me was that you should keep doing that. You shouldn't sacrifice that. Okay, I'll keep doing it. But I figured out that I could go and take some of these like general curriculum nonsense classes at a community college nearby. Yeah. And ergo, like I could get to 30 credit hours. You were only allowed to have 20, I think, and I could get to 30. Right. So one of my crowning college moments, my happiest moments in university was when I figured out I could kill myself a little faster by adding more of a class load. But you know what was cool about that, man? One of the things that like it definitely taught me something. It cost me too, definitely cost me. But it gained this thing that I realized like there's a superpower that I can like go into hyper focus mode by virtue of not having any time to do anything else. With 30 credit hours and a business, I didn't have a single moment to screw around, which was cool because I crushed those semesters, like great grades, great business outcomes. What did I lose? Well, like girlfriends were kind of tough.
I lost all my girlfriends.
Shooting pool with my friends was kind of tough.
Yeah.
Doing anything like and having any kind of fun, like going to parties. Like I also distinctly remember this moment in like my junior year where 3 good friends of mine, one of whom was a roommate, were talking about this party they were going to that I hadn't even heard about. And all of a sudden I realized I'm not even getting invited anymore.
You're not even there.
Not even there.
Literally, like you're a ghost.
I am a ghost that pays a higher proportion of the rent because I had started to use their house as my office. Yep. So by virtue of taking over 80% of the household, I started paying 80% of the rent. And so, yeah, there were just a ton, right? Like spring breaks weren't a thing. I remember. Oh my God. Uh, I won't name the company. Local Columbus company. Well, you
Yeah.
may know them. We had built something pretty significant for them, and then it broke.
Oh,
And
right. Right.
I spent finals week
Yeah.
and then spring break
Yep.
trying to fix that shit. And that was one of those points where when we say like it nearly killed us, I mean like it nearly killed me. I was
Dude, I get it.
exhausted afterwards. I was a ball of anxiety. Yeah. So there were a lot of missed experiences.
Let me build on that. So, let's say college was wiped off the map.
Yeah, college. What was college? I have a degree that said I went.
Yeah, right, right. I do not. For a lot of people who had phenomenal college experiences, got to go on the spring breaks, the big trips, the gap years, etc. The idea of that just being deleted from their history sounds insane,
Yeah.
right? So again, when I say not worth it, I almost think it's more not worth it, to have lost that experience to people who had it. I never had it, so it's hard to say that,
Yep.
what it would have been. I just know that I didn't have it. If I fast forward a few years later, I'm like 25, right? And now we have hundreds and hundreds of employees. And one day, and mind you, like I'm 25, but like maturity wise, imagine you're maturing at different thresholds,
Sure.
in different ways. From a business standpoint, I had matured extremely quickly.
Yeah.
But I was still a 25-year-old kid.
Right. So emotional maturity, right?
Emotional maturity was far from that. Okay. I still had no worldview whatsoever. So I'm giving an example. One day, I'm talking to one of my new employees, and he's an old guy. He's got to be like 38. And he's talking
Nearly
about
dust.
how, yeah, right. He's talking about how he's so excited that he just got a new promotion with our company, and that it means that that they'll be able to cover more of his daughter's expense for college. And I know that sounds like a weird like moment in time for something to occur to you, but I was like, whoa, hold on a second. Like your job here is going to pay for someone else's college, or more specifically,
Yeah.
if you lose this job, your daughter can't go to college.
Yeah.
Like, I'm responsible for that.
Yeah. Thanks for the weight on the shoulders there, pal.
Like I know it sounds dumb, and eventually something has to occur to you for the first time every time, and that was it. And I remember like just feeling this crushing weight at 25. Like at 25, you have problems, but you don't have crushing weight of responsibility problems, right? Now everybody's crushing weight and everybody's pain is their own. So if your crushing weight is, and I don't mean to like downplay this, but if your crushing weight is you're a developer and you have to ship code and your boss is an a-hole and I get that, right?
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, I was responsible for an awful lot of people.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, and I had a hard time dealing with that. At the same time, okay, this is around the same year, I decided that I wanted to build like a network, a local network of other people in the technology business. Back then, there was no LinkedIn, there was no, whatever. I picked up a local paper, Business First, if you remember it, and I looked at some list they had created of all the companies that were like the top technology companies of Columbus, Ohio of like 1998 or whatever the time period was. And I did a weird thing. I called every single one of those people. Like I would call the main line of the company. I would get transferred to that person, and I'd be like, "Hey, I'm Wil Schroter. You have no idea who I am, but I'm in technology. You're in technology. Would you like to come to my house for a drink?" I can't imagine if someone called me. I guess I'd be cooler about it, but like it was a very random call. Within the first year, these events that I was doing had like 200 CEOs at them, CEOs and CTOs. Okay. Of all companies and all connected in all different ways, like a huge guest list. The reason I'm bringing this up is because the average age in that room was like 48 years old. And then there was me.
There was you.
Who still had pimples, right?
Yep.
And I remember thinking like, this isn't how a 25-year-old is supposed to live.
You're right. Yeah.
Right. Like,
I'm now recreating the college parties that I missed, but in the most absolutely bizarre way possible.
These really old men. They're almost all dudes. And that's how I met Elliot's dad.
Oh, wow. That's funny. Yeah. Makes sense.
I met his dad he was sitting in my living room, and I met him 10 years before I met Elliot. And, but my point is that party makes absolute sense for me at 50.
Yeah.
But at 25, no. Ironically, I would have never gotten invited to that party.
It doesn't even make half as much sense at 25, right? It doesn't.
But what I'm saying is that period of my life where it should have been spent going to other parties or doing other things, right? I had this bizarre life where I was living like a 50-year-old man at 25. The same conversations, the same weights, etc. meaning I never got to have the carefree 20s. I was always saddled with a massive weight of having to live a different life at a different time. It'd be like having kids when you were 8.
Right.
Right? Like, it just didn't make sense. You get it.
Sometimes I feel like my emotional maturity was probably around 8 when I had my first kids. It's super interesting too, because I unsaddled myself with the business right at the time I was graduating. But what was super interesting about it was, then did I go back and recreate all of that? Did I go wild out like I'm free? No, what did I do? Right back into it, right? Walked straight back in, but saddled myself with bigger and different responsibilities. Now on an international stage where we're building stuff across borders with teams that talk about emotional maturity being low and worldview being low. Now I'm spreading this lack of knowledge across multiple cultures, which always makes it easier, right? So it was super interesting to me, kind of the point you were making before. It's like, we didn't know what we had lost. Right? Like, if we were to go back and we're to take like one of our friends and say like, I'm going to delete your college experiences. That's a very different human, but we didn't have those to kind of compare to. And so it didn't even occur to me at the time. It was like, oh, now I could take a beat, I could pause a bit, and I could go back and I could maybe do something that you can't really get most of the stuff back. But I didn't even have that reaction. It wasn't like, okay, now I'm unsaddled, let me run wild a little bit. No, it was like, I'm unsaddled, I feel naked, where's the next saddle?
Yeah, it's interesting because all of my habits got built based on that, right? Like
100%.
I've never had a couple months off where I didn't have a job, right? You know, I was in between. Now I get it. That's also stressful. I'm saying I never had a moment where work wasn't like absolutely the priority, right? Ever. There's been not one second when it's ever been the case. And it doesn't occur to me that you can't just be permanently stressed about that. Like, that is my baseline. Like, the anxiety that comes with knowing that on any given day something can go wrong, like exponentially wrong. I don't just mean life wrong. I mean, we all have that. But I've never had if I just show up at my job, I'll keep getting paid unless I fuck something up, right? I've never had that. I'm not saying it wasn't worth it. I'm saying, but I never had that, right? That I'm sure.
Yeah, for sure. No, but I think that's kind of an interesting transition there. So, we talked about missed experiences, but let's talk about then kind of like, this definitely carved some stuff in stone into our habits, our personalities, our psyches,
bad shit,
our bodies in some cases, right? Like, and in fact, I think in this category, because again, like some of the experiences I look back on and I go like, had I gone to 20 frat parties, would my life be measurably different or better now? I don't know. I honestly don't know, right? Like, there are fun stories. Like, I get together with some of my friends and they're like, remember that time when so-and-so pulled the tree out of, going across the quad? I'm like, no, I don't.
Nope.
Actually, do remember that, but only by secondhand. So, but there are other things where like that we did or were done to us that I think we could arguably say were significantly like less worth it, right? The fact that at 21 years old, I think I've shared this story. I know I've shared it with you. Well, I don't know if I've shared it on the podcast before. My business cell phone, super sweet Motorola StarTAC, by the way, when that thing would ring, I would immediately get tired.
Yeah,
like,
right.
Didn't know that was an anxiety response and depression. My phone would ring and immediately, when I say tired, I wasn't like, oh, I don't feel like answering that. I mean, like, nearly passing out.
Yeah,
it's an anxiety response, right? Like, I was like one of those the fainting goats. When you clap your hands, it falls over. My phone rings, Ryan falls over. Why? Because of so much stress that came through that tiny little device. At such a young age.
Yeah, I think about like the habits that were ingrained in me. The not good habits. Okay, nothing where you can say, well, you're disciplined and you're fuck all that. This is not that, right? No. I have hard coded into my psyche 2 modes. I'm either working or I'm guilty. I've never been not working and also not felt guilty unless there was some condition where I couldn't possibly be reasonably working. For example, like I was coming out of surgery, right? Or it's Christmas, right? Like in either case, and I've worked through Christmas before, I'm not proud of that. But my point is that it built, when I talk about things not worth it, it built a psyche that made it conditionally hard for me to enjoy free time without guilt. Right? And again, I get it. You're like, oh, you should see a therapist, but I get it. Like, I understand why it exists, but it's existed for 30 years, right? And like, there's a whole bunch of reasons for that, but that was that's a lot of mental weight to permanently carry, and it all stems from entrepreneurship.
Yeah, it does. And I think that's one of the big dangers there was that, again, there's always this weird, well, not always. If you have some success, there's always this weird mix of, well, I got that because of this, right? And so there's this justification of some of these bad behaviors, some of which were just, byproducts of all the action activity that we were engaged in. But you don't even think about changing them. Like, it didn't even occur to me that maybe these things aren't healthy, right? I think it's part of the reason, like, where as we came through that period where all of a sudden millennials were flooding the workforce, and now we've gone on and on and on, and there's a lot more discussion around, like, workplace health and behaviors and cultures and all this. And I think in the beginning, you and I were kind of like, what? Like, what do you mean? Like, we should lead with purpose? Like, what is that? Like, didn't we lead with just getting some shit done right now? Like, we just hammer through this.
Yeah. That sounds disgusting.
Yeah, right.
What kind of lazy trope is that, right? And again, we're laughing about it just so folks are listening. We're laughing at it because we understood how poorly programmed we were. I was rewarded for decades for hurting myself, right? Yeah. Like, and I was proud of it. When I would say, hey guys, I can't come to work because I've worked so hard that I'm sick, I was like, oh, now I have justification for not working as much because now I'm laying in bed sick. Yes. When I say proud of it, it's a perverted term to say it, but like, I felt justified. Like, I 100%. Felt justified in taking time off. Like, for a good 20 years, it would never occur to me to just take a day off because I felt like it.
Yeah, just because you felt like it. But like, think about it. Well, you and I spend 95% of our time together working. The 5% of the time where you and I are like, hey, let's do something leisurely. What do? We go into a workshop. We build things. We mulched your yard once, right? Like, even when we're like, let's go leisure. What should leisure look like? How about hard labor? Yeah, that sounds right? That way we don't need to feel guilty about it, and we can still have some fun.
That was me today. Right. You and I talked about it. Like, so I get up at 4 a.m. this morning, and I always get up at 4 a.m. And my planning for my day is how I can squeeze in enough work between my work. So I'm building a house, and like, I'm not even kidding. Like, my thought process this morning, as soon as I wake up, was, okay, sunrise is at 7:30 a.m. So if I can get to the construction site, my house, before 7:30, if I leave my house at 7, I'll get there exactly at daybreak so that I can start doing work. But before that, since I'm going to have a couple extra hours, like between 4 and 7.
Daybreak,
Yeah, I'm like, okay, I can get at least an hour or an hour and a half of like all my busy work for startups.com knocked out. Then I can go into my workshop and I can build a bunch of stuff that I can then take to the job site. And then, no, this is the best part though. While I'm at the job site, right? This is this morning. I'm sitting in my Bobcat skid steer moving earth, right? I'm literally like shoveling earth all over the job site. And it's like 8:15. And while I'm trying to operate this heavy machinery, I'm checking my Slack to make sure there's nothing I'm missing.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
You know when they say don't take medicine if you're going to operate heavy machinery? This is what they're talking about, like specifically this kind of stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, if I end up dying like this, it's be so poetic, right?
Well, you would have been proud of yourself.
Checking work while he was working.
Yeah.
But my point is, the reason I was checking my phone, and mind you, as you know, we don't get started like technically officially till 9 a.m. The reason I was checking my phone at 8:15 while I'm operating heavy machinery is because I felt guilty that I might not be present for someone else at work in case they had a question before hours, right? Which makes no sense. But that is my default condition. That is how I'm programmed.
Yeah. Yeah,
and that came from
we just did
period.
Daylight savings, right? Last couple days ago, right? We don't do that here, and so now you guys are 2 hours ahead of me. So like when I wake up at 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning, one of the very first things I do is check: does anybody need me? Right
there, it is.
Does anybody really need me in that regard? Probably not. Generally not. We've built a good enough business and stable enough and have good teams, and yet because going back to 21-year-old Ryan who falls asleep when his phone rings, because that's probably something really serious. Like it's hard to shake this stuff.
You know, something that's really funny about everything we talk about here is that none of it is new. Everything you're dealing with right now has been done 1,000 times before you, which means the answer already exists. You may just not know it, but that's okay. that's kind of what we're here to do. We talk about this stuff on the show, but we actually solve these problems all day long at groups.startups.com. So if any of this sounds familiar, stop guessing about what to do. Let us just give you the answers to the test and be done with it. And so when we talk about, the cost, when I say things not worth it, you can, I don't know if I want to say not worth it to put it against the justification, but if you talk about the hard-coded costs of what it took to do what we do, going back to that story with my daughter, they weren't insignificant. And when people look at the outcomes, they're like, hey, you're running a successful business, or maybe you have some nice stuff, or, something like that. They only look at the outcome. They don't look at everything behind it.
Yeah.
Right. That's why, I kind of joke when I say this, and I say, show me any successful founder and I'll show you somebody in need of deep therapy. Yeah, well. Right. Because you don't get there, right, without a significant amount of sacrifice.
Hey, Will, what's the name of our podcast?
Yeah, Startup Therapy. Yeah.
Why did we pick that?
Yeah, pretty specific, right? So, okay, we've definitely got into the tough parts, why it wasn't. Yeah. Let's talk about what was worth it. What were the sacrifices, or what were the outcomes for those sacrifices that honestly, everything we just said, like not taking care of ourselves or missed experiences, et cetera, the worth it was so worth it that we'd do it again. We would take on that level of pain and suffering again because we got these things. What comes to mind that where you go, honestly, this part was worth it?
Yeah, look, I think you and I both have talked about this before, and we agree on this one. It's the freedom. It's the flexibility.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Like, I had one of those little moments of gratitude yesterday. Jack, my 7-year-old, comes home from school, pops into my office, happy as can be, got something he wants to show me, pulls it out of his backpack. Before he does, he stops and he goes, Dad, I'm glad you're home when I get home.
That's cool.
I thought, you know what? Me too, buddy. Me too. Right? And I don't take that for granted. Now, there are other ways of achieving that, right? So I think one of the important things that we should point out here is the sacrifices you and I made are not necessarily only specific to entrepreneurship, right? I know doctors, lawyers, other people who have done.
Oh, yeah. Sacrifices universal.
Sacrifice everywhere.
Parents.
Neither are the benefits, right? There are other ways. You can have a remote work job and get exactly what I got with Jack yesterday. But this is one of the things that has come out of this. So like for me, it's been freedom at a lot of levels, right? Which is, some of it is control, right? Yeah. Some of it is being able to say, like, I define certain things, like while all of my friends were out trying to have the right haircut, which was a crew cut at the time, to be able to get hired by Procter & Gamble coming out of business school. Yeah. Literally, there was like a haircut you had to have. And I was building things my way and defining my path, what I wanted to do. I had control. Nobody could take that away from me. I liked that. Some of it is beyond control. Actually, some of it is being able to be a little out of control at times, right? The freedom to do that when and where it's necessary. And like for me, the life design has been a huge part of what's occupied kind of my 40s, and trying to figure out, like, now that we've done all this stuff, like, how do we start to repair the body, repair the psyche, make sure that the time with family is as high quality as it can be. In my case, that's involved like moving all over the world, right? Which is about to happen again. We're getting ready to change hemispheres once more. And so I think for me, the freedom is probably the one at the very, very top.
Yeah. And I think when we say freedom means so many things to so many different people. Yeah. And a lot of it has to do with where you came from before that freedom, to appreciate what that freedom means to you. Some people may say, hey, I just wanted, financial freedom from my parents. And I get that. Again, everybody's journey is their own. Mine was, I just want to be able to do whatever I want to do at any given moment. Now, if you can say, most of that involves work anyway, but that's also part of it. Like, I want to be able to work on whatever I want to work on at any given possible moment. Massive. This podcast is a reflection of that. We've been doing this for 5-6 years, and it's been a long time.
More, right? We're in our 7th year of this podcast.
Whoa, I didn't even know that. I actually just guessed at the number. Also, for all those of you that have been listening to us for at least that long, thank you.
Thank you.
Much appreciated.
Thank you all.
Yes, but that said, it's in that time, we've been able to do all kinds of different things, and the podcast was one of them. The podcast, I always say, Ed, we had a boss. Yeah. They would have made us stop doing it.
Yeah,
right,
100%.
Right,
like, the ROI on this is terrible. Yeah.
Yeah, right. What's interesting about the ROI on it, on this podcast, for folks that are listening, is whenever someone comes to me, and I know you feel the same way, and they're like, dude, I've been listening to your podcast now for since the beginning, hundreds of episodes. I'm blown away by it, and I know you are too. But that's the ROI.
Yeah.
I'm like, we got to sit down with somebody, let them inside our heads in a very vulnerable way, but also, get to hopefully validate some of the things that they're going through.
Every time we get one of those emails, tweets, whatever it is that speaks to that, like it's that 5 seconds of gratitude that made the 7 years worth it.
100%. And so our freedom, it's control our day. For me to be able to do that, for me to be able to sit down with you every week and be able to share these ideas and kind of, what's going on in our lives and just do whatever the hell we want with it is enormous. Now, that's just one tiny bit of a bigger mosaic, but it's kind of what this freedom is. For me, whenever I didn't want to do something, no matter what the consequence was, I just stopped doing it. Now, sometimes that cost me millions of dollars in lost revenue, right? But honestly, worth it. Totally worth it, right? Like if I had the decision to do, I'd do it exactly the same. And I say that because having the agency and the freedom to be able to operate, you wake up in the morning and say, this is what I want to do. This morning, I wanted to go operate a skid steer and move earth, right? Like that's what I wanted to do. And knowing that there's no reason that I can't, and let me separate. There's no authority to tell me that I can't, like an actual, you can't do this. Now, maybe a whole reasons why I shouldn't, from running, from
totally
killing myself in the skid steer, whatever else. So be it. But no one's there to say that I can't. And I think that is by far top of my list, and there's barely a number two. And what was interesting to me around this freedom, right? That you and I were able to create in our lives is that it didn't cost much. A lot of people think freedom is I sell for $10 million and I get $10 million and I never have to work in. Yes, that is a level of freedom. That is a level of freedom.
Yeah.
It's not the level of freedom. My freedom came at 19 when I started a company.
Same.
Now, granted, I was getting paid nearly nothing at the time, but I also didn't really have that much in expenses.
We were getting paid. We were just getting paid in different ways. And I'm not talking about the Damon's ribs that you got or the massive tab that Victorian's Midnight Cafe gave me in return for their website. I'm talking about the unlocks that it gave us, man. To me, that period in time, there was cash at the end of that business when I sold, and that was great. And I got to pay off a bunch of friends, and they got to pay off student loans and all sorts of cool stuff. But man, the thing that I got handed during that period that made it all worth it was that key on it. It was the freedom, but it was the key that said agency on it, right? Where I now knew I can go do a thing. I can do it on my terms, and I can find a way to make it work. And did I have other friends who were making more money than I was at that point? Yeah. All right. They went and got good jobs at top 3 consulting firms or whatever, and were making good cash in this first couple of years where I was just sacrificing, but that didn't bother me, right? Like, and ultimately it's worked out to where I'm happy doing what I'm doing.
I've had 3 different cases that come to mind as I'm just brainstorming top of mind, where I had an opportunity to make essentially more money at a job than I could have doing the startup that I was doing at the time. Okay. And as I recall them, the first one was essentially my first company where we were going to get bought out and we were going to take the company public. And essentially, you're working for the stockholders at that point. And I would have made exponentially more money doing that. I wasn't even 1% excited about it. In other words, like, here's somebody saying, here's untold fortunes that you can make, and you were in a position to make them, but you have to accept this. You have to accept hierarchy. And I was like, nope, not even 1% interested. And I bailed, and I'm proud of that. Another case, this is random, where someone who didn't know what I was doing at the time, right? This is after we had sold the agency, offered me a C-level job, like a CEO level job, making a ridiculous salary. And I was like, and again, they didn't understand where I was at the time. And I appreciated the fact that they offered. And I thought to myself, man, I could do this job standing on my head. I could make like just gobs of money. It was a 7-figure offer, right? Like I could make gobs of money, not work crazy hours and all these things. And I was like, I can't think of anything I'd want to do less, because it involved having a boss, and the boss might have been great, right? For all I know, I don't, dislike people. I wasn't doing it because I was getting paid. I was doing it because I wanted the freedom. Here's the irony. I'll take the freedom of doing whatever I want and get $0 over any level of control over any level of money. If you said I'll pay you 10x more than you're making now, like whatever you're making. I had a friend of mine, I won't say his name because it's not fair, because he shared this with me in confidence, but he got offered $1 million to go take over an internet company as the CEO. and he's a great guy. He's a previous entrepreneur himself. Okay. And one day we're sitting in his office at this company. I said, I got to ask, man, like, why'd you take this job? Right? Like, you're an entrepreneur, like, is what you do.
Yeah.
And he's like, I hate risk. I was like,
Whoop.
bro, literally, you're an entrepreneur. I mean, cause he
Yeah.
had started and sold 2 companies, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, I can't stand risk. He's like,
wow.
I can take down a 7-figure salary plus bonuses and stuff like that at a very high profile job and not think about it, right? I'm just going to get paid. I don't have to worry about it.
Yep.
And we paid a lot. And I was like, damn, it would never even occur to me to do that. Like, I don't even have those gears. You know what I mean?
Once you have freedom, it's a hard thing. Now, I think everybody's going to have different mileage in this stuff.
Yeah.
In his case, freedom wasn't free, right? Freedom came with the shackles of risk and the fear of the risk, right? It's not really the risk, right? It's the fear of the outcome of risk, right? Like risk itself doesn't matter, right? It's what happens on their side of it. So I get it. I get it. But interesting though. So I'm thinking now, in hindsight, I can go back and I sort of know that it was at that moment at 18, wandering the halls of university, where the chance encounter led to me starting the business. And that was where freedom started. Well, in my case, I think freedom started a little bit before that. We'll dig into it. But I don't know that I realized that. Like, I realized that was the moment of freedom. When was the first time, do you remember, and I'm struggling now to do it. Do you remember the first time you realized you had the freedom? Not in hindsight, but in that moment where you're like, I'm free. Right? Do you remember that?
I don't.
I don't either.
There wasn't like a seminal moment where I was like, oh my God, I'm now free.
Yeah.
I do remember like early in my career, there was moments where I'm like, I'm going to otherwise have to look for a job.
Yeah.
And that sounds terrifying. Yeah. Not just the job search, but the idea of being put into a corporate machine.
Sure.
For a lot of the folks that have worked here at startups.com, because we tend to sell the idea of being free. If they leave here, 2 paths. A lot of the folks that leave here to start something new, which is kind of our goal, right? That is the ultimate. Like, if you leave here and you start something new, you have graduated from this company.
Nothing feels better.
Exactly. It's exactly what we'd love to see you do. Now, that doesn't mean if you leave here and take a job that you failed in some way. But when folks leave here and they take a job somewhere, it's always very begrudgingly. Yeah. Right? Yep. It almost feels like, oh, fuck, I got to take a job. In the same way that founders, when things don't go well and they got to go take a job, they do it begrudgingly. Yeah. Even when the job pays a ton of money, it especially or pays any money, just pays money. Because you weren't getting paid
feels like a step back.
Yeah. I hear this from founders constantly that have gone through this. They're a year into job, whatever it is, from where they were, and they're always miserable. They're always lamenting it. Now, the first 6 months, they're over the moon because they're like, I get paid and I have health insurance. This is amazing, right? They forget what that means. I took a vacation. I didn't even know what that was anymore.
Right.
I get it. But after a year or so, once the pixie dust wears off and they realize that they're just a cog in a wheel, it's impossible to put that genie back in the bottle and forget that
We've
existed.
had so many of those conversations, both from founders that we know who've had to go back to the job, or for people who've left and gone on to a job, which of course, like, they were excited about when they did it, right? I think the begrudging piece comes a little bit later, usually some like 3 to 6 months, or wherever the first performance review was, or wherever the first time like they didn't get to do what they wanted to go do, they realized how much freedom they had. Yeah, those conversations have meant a lot. But like, I think that's kind of another fun segue, which is like, that's one of the things that have made all of this worth it, right?
Yeah,
not watching people go to jobs that they don't like, but the impact that we've had unlocking that door to freedom for so many people, because the vast majority of folks that we know have not gone back to a job, and they haven't gone back to a typical career path. They've gone on to start their own stuff, or they were already starting their own stuff by the time we met them as founders. We're talking about employees or clients.
It's particularly interesting for us because we both help founders directly. I mean, so we have a very specific impact, like of countless founders that we've helped. And then like we've watched some of the founders or the companies where we've had a hand in their journey, go public or have a big outcome. And it's like, damn, I keep a spreadsheet of all the people that have worked for me for all the years that have gone on to become CEOs. And there's over 100 people on that spreadsheet.
Yeah, that's wild.
Right?
That's wild.
It's crazy to think about that, right? Like, a lot of people that have worked for anyone at any given time, they went on to become VPs, or they went on to become CTOs or something like that. And that's all awesome. There's nothing wrong with that. But I'm saying there's at least 100 people specifically that specifically became CEOs.
Yeah.
And
it makes sense. They were sitting around going like, well, shit, if Wil can do it.
The bar is so low. are so low. But the reason I say that is because I feel really connected to that journey.
Yeah.
And I'm 100% sure in almost every one of those cases, if you ask them, because I've actually had a lot of these conversations, they would say, I map back that path to specifically the time that I had with you.
Yeah.
Right. In what I learned and what you showed me I was capable of, and et cetera.
Yeah. Open
That
those
is
doors.
awesome.
Yeah.
That is awesome. That doesn't mean I couldn't have done that if I didn't become an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
But like what I'm saying is there are aspects of what building your own thing allows you to do that, like if I was VP of Chase Bank, I just couldn't say that. Like I just couldn't, right? Now you could say, well, if impact was important, you wouldn't have gone to Chase Bank. Fair, right?
Yeah.
But there's no guarantee that I would have a job that would have exactly the impact I want. Here, we get to design that.
Yeah. Exactly. You know, it's funny. I'm gonna use a comparison that you use a lot, actually, which is the difference between Steve Jobs and Tim Cook. Tim Cook, super talented CEO, done great things.
Yep.
But like when you think about the number of times, this is pure anecdotal. I could be way off. Empirically, I might be absolutely wrong here.
Right.
But anecdotally, the number of people that you talk about, like having been inspired by jobs, built their own things because of jobs, changed their life because of jobs, versus the number of people that you hear say that about Tim Cook. In my world, like again, maybe there's an echo chamber that I'm part of that I'm unaware of at this point, but I know I'm part of some. But it's interesting, right? The impact that has. Why? Because he showed them something different. Like Tim Cook's an excellent practitioner, wonderful operator, right? But Jobs did something different for people, right? We do something different. You can go work for Chase Bank. Does that mean you'll never start something? No, but if you hang out with the two of us, I'd say the likelihood you're going to go on to start something goes up exponentially versus working for Doug and HR at Chase.
You know, I got to see, one thing I always take off the table is wealth. The reason I say that is like, I'm very thankful and grateful for, the financial opportunities that being an entrepreneur has afforded me. However, it's a dumb way to make money.
I always tell people, like, they're like, what's the easiest way to make money, Ryan? Get a job. That's what they're designed to do. It's literally made just for that transaction of put work in, get money out, right? Dead simple.
I was like, this is the dumbest way to get wealthy. And I'm not saying that, like, obviously when it works, right? It's the same way I feel. Years ago, I used to run a casting company in Hollywood, and we cast for tons of shows on TV. And I would get all these people, that would come to our site that were trying to get on these shows, be like, well, should I move to Hollywood, to become famous, essentially? Right? And I was like, absolutely not.
Yeah.
I was like,
how are your barista skills?
Yeah, exactly. I was like, let me put it this way. If you don't move here, you will never get cast. Straight up. Okay.
Yeah.
No one is sending their casting director to Hoboken for talent, unless you're doing reality. But it's also the dumbest way to build a career, because the probability that it's going to end in anything but being a barista, not knocking baristas, by the way, is pretty much zero.
Yep.
Right. And so when I think about career path, wealth path, this is a dumb idea.
Yeah.
Right. Now, obviously, when it works, different story. Actually, it's funny. So today, I'm on the job site, and there's tons of people on the job site today. There's framers, there's electricians, whatever. And one of the guys comes up to me, okay, and he has no idea that it's my house. Right.
You're just the guy that drives the Bobcat.
Yeah, exactly. No idea. I'm covered in shit, right? And so he walks up to me, and we're just talking, right? And he's like, "Man, I have no idea what this guy does, but this house is amazing, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's all right, right?" I just like totally blow it off, right?
I've worked on bigger.
Yeah, right, yeah. But in his mind, he's looking at this, going, "It must all be worth it." Right?
Yeah.
Because this guy is a thing, right? Like a big house, right? Like a thing. And I think to myself, like, the way you perceive that outcome is that this guy just started on day one. He just did a lot of work every day and just kept getting paid. And this was the final outcome.
Yeah. As if that's guaranteed. Yeah.
Right. Now, to be fair, there are lots of other jobs where it's not guaranteed you're going to become like the next CEO like Tim Cook did, but it's a fairly good chance that if you continue on this path, you'll wind up in a very good financial position.
Yeah.
Okay. If you're a senior partner or managing partner at a law firm or a consulting firm, etc. Now, if we had those folks, oh my God, okay. Let me give you this one. A management consultant at a big firm, okay, could be accounting, could be McKinsey style thing, that is 45 years old and has made senior partner, managing partner status, literally has no soul. And by the way, I'm saying because this person worked so hard and sacrificed so much. And Ryan, I saw the best one of the best ads I've ever seen in my life, and being a former ad guy, I have so much respect for this. It was getting off the plane at LaGuardia. Getting off the plane in LaGuardia, this giant sign, like mural, billboard rather, right? That was on the wall was just a little kid. I can't remember what they're holding, like a gift or something, okay? Uh-huh. And get this, the copy, and you know I love copy. The copy was, remember me? Dude, are you kidding?
Yeah.
Right? And then the bottom was like Boston Consulting. I probably wasn't, but Boston Consulting Group, we keep you at home.
We keep you at home, yeah.
I was like the most genius placement, the most genius copy.
Yeah, because they're talking to the people getting off that plane who probably don't, I mean, of course, they're being a little hyperbolic, but not by much.
That's exactly what that person's worried about. Now, the reason I bring that up is because we're talking about, was it worth it, et cetera.
Yeah.
At which point you've chosen a career where that ad makes sense to you, that ad hits home, you fucked up.
Yeah.
Like I'm saying, like it cost you something, and that is the ultimate cost.
So it is. So I think this is but go back to what you said before, which is that, but at least that came with, right? At least that came with, right? I mean, like, not that it was worth it, but again, but there was like some certainty around that financial path, right? There was a year where that person also didn't get paid.
Right.
I think this is one of those things where, like, when you look back at some of the sacrifices we made, would I have been unwilling to make them again to get exactly what I got now? No, I would do most of the same things. I think there are some sacrifices that I made that I didn't have to, and I still could have gotten here. And I think that's where we have to be a little careful, right? We didn't know. Yeah. But I think that's where, like, what part of what we're trying to help people do now is to understand that, like, you should have a life and a startup, right? Because here's the thing. The financial outcome is not guaranteed. The costs and sacrifices are, right? Those are guaranteed. Those come with the territory. The outcome may or may not, right?
I agree. And so I think for us, when we're looking back on our own backgrounds, or folks that are listening and whether they're kind of running through this same math, I think the important thing to know is, like what you said, that yes, absolutely, the costs are going to be there, but you have to remember what would be worth it. By the way, it's usually not the money. There has to be some heuristic that you're optimizing for that is more than money, because when it comes back to it, that's what's going to be worthwhile. That's what you're going to look back on. It's going to be a kid that says, "Hey, Dad, I'm so grateful," etc. But it's going to be that sense of pride that you feel that you made those sacrifices and it was worth it, without the cost of something like seeing that goddamn photo on the wall of that kid saying, "Hey, by the way, you missed my entire childhood." So for us as founders, we do have to have a threshold whether it's worth it, and if it is, go all in. And at what point it's costing you something more than it's going to buy you, get the hell out, because it'll never be worth it no matter how much you make.
Overthinking your startup because you're going it alone? You don't have to, and honestly, you shouldn't, because instead, you can learn directly from peers who've been in your shoes. Connect with bootstrapped founders and the advisors helping them win in the Startups.com community. Check out the Startups.com community at www.startups.com to see if it's for you. Could be just the thing you need. I hope to see you inside.